Let's get started right now with Darwin. Good morning, Darwin.
Good morning to you.
How are you, and are you still freezing there?
Yes.
Yes.
The deep freeze has continued, but we're expecting 50 degrees by Wednesday, which means people will have to rush for their air conditioners. It's been a historic winter, but I have some exciting news.
Okay, waiting.
As you say, you never know what I'm going to talk about.
That's right.
I am set to become the new president of the Chester A. Arthur fan club.
Chester A. Arthur?
If you don't, for our listeners who may not be fresh on who Chester A. Arthur was, a survey was taken 3 years ago, and among history students at Columbia University, and only 10% of the students identified Chester A. Arthur. So let me tell you about my hero.
Okay.
First, why would I be selected president? When I was in the University of Miami, I wrote my thesis on President Arthur, who was president from September of 1881 till March of 1885, and I called it Chester A. Arthur, Coxcomb in the White House. And now, I didn't select my thesis because I thought that Chester A. Arthur was the greatest president in America. I thought he was one of the most interesting men who ever served in that office. And let me tell you a little about him. He came up, he was appointed the customs collector at the New York port. And it was a patronage job. And at that time, the New York port supplied in customs duties 1/3 of the federal revenue. So that's how he sort of rose up. And then President Garfield asked him to run as vice president when he sought the White House. And Arthur really didn't want the job, but he agreed to go along with it. And then, as we all know, President Garfield was assassinated. However, he hung on for 90 days. What happened is they couldn't find the slug in his spleen, and they used unsanitary instruments. Even Alexander Graham Bell had developed this early metal detector, and so in a way, the doctors killed Garfield, and Chester, we called him Chet, everyone called him Chet, was at his home in Lexington Avenue in New York, and he received the news that Garfield had been assassinated, and he actually started crying. But then Garfield survived for another 90 days, and then Chester became the president. Now, he was the president during the great gilded age of America, the age of the robber barons and the Rockefellers and the Carnegies and the Goulds. And it was a glorious time. And in many ways, he was the role model for Jackie Kennedy. And I'll have to explain that. First, he went in without a first lady. He had married Ellen Herndon. He called her Nell. And he was often gone on patronage jobs, raising money for the party. And Nell was a great music lover. And one night she went to the opera, and her carriage wasn't ready. So she had to stand out in the cold 30 minutes. And she came down with a coma and died 2 days later. So Chester entered the office, a bachelor, and because she had died and she never got to be first lady. Well, what happened is he started getting letters from women all over the country, even some from abroad, like Europe and France and Ireland. Many women wanted to become the first lady. Well, he never married again. However, he sure changed the White House. He thought, long before Jackie Kennedy decided to redecorate, he thought the White House was abominable. The man had great taste, and his home was opulent. Of course, he had collected a great deal of money at the port of New York, and so he decided that everything in the White House had to go, and but Congress wouldn't give him any money to redecorate. So you know what he did? He rounded up all these possessions in the White House. He found trousers left by Abraham Lincoln, a stovepipe hat worn by John Quincy Adams. He got all sorts of memorabilia that had been accumulated. And he took all these wagon loads of stuff out on the lawn of the White House and had the greatest yard sale in the history of America. Does it sound like I'm making all this up?
I mean, first of all, I love this because I thought I know a lot of things about history, but I didn't know all this about Chester A. Arthur, and this is fascinating.
But you had heard of him, right?
Of course.
I usually, when I mention him to people, they say, who is Chester A. Arthur? But this is just one of the many reasons that I liked him. I will also tell you some very controversial things that he sold in a minute, but I just wanted to say a little bit about the man himself. He was considered the best-dressed man of the 19th century. He had a wardrobe that eventually encompassed 1,000 tailor-made suits. He was the first president to have a valet, and often when he got up in the morning, he would go through 20 suits before deciding on which one he wanted to wear. And he had a morning suit, an afternoon suit, and evening clothes. But his first duty of the day was again, long before the Kennedys, he had lavish dinners and entertainment at the White House. And are you ready? 14-course meals. Now, I've had some 8-course meals, but I don't really recall any 14. And he insisted on planning the dishes himself.
Was he overweight?
So, yes, he was a little bit portly, but that was the style of the day, you know. And so once he got that done and had breakfast, it was sort of time for lunch. And then he brought in very great cultural artists. The only thing is he had a peculiarity. The only man that I know who liked orange underwear was named Frank Sinatra, but long before Frank Sinatra, Arthur preferred to wear his undergarments in some color of orange. Apparently Sinatra just settled for orange, but Arthur had broken orange down into various categories. Persimmon,
I can't believe
orange,
I love this. Who made those for him?
Pumpkin orange, marigold orange. I could go on.
Hey, Darwin, where did he buy them?
Colors of orange.
Darwin, where did he buy them?
Oh, he had tailors. Now, just to show he had good taste, once he raised all this money, he guess who he hired as a decorator? Louis Tiffany. Now, Tiffany at that time was not a famous man, so he brought in Tiffany. And there was a blue room. It was dark blue. They painted it sky blue and painted stars on the ceiling. And, of course, Tiffany, they brought in stained glass. and apparently the White House under Arthur became the most lavish and best decorated that it ever was. Now, why didn't it last? Well, Theodore Roosevelt became president, and he hated everything. So he cleared everything out, and I think put a few bull moose heads on the walls and stuff. But it was a glorious time. And poor Chet, as he was called, some people called him Prince Arthur. In those days, men had a carriage. Well, he didn't want just a regular carriage. He wanted the most elaborate carriage ever seen in America. Now, unlike the Queen of England, he had it painted olive green with decorations in scarlet color, and for his lace curtains, he had them made of spun gold. and then he had 2 grand white horses. You see why I'm interested in this?
Oh, I'm spellbound with all this. I can't believe this.
Yeah, it was wonderful. Now, before I get on this controversial sale he made, he also, remember he said he was in mourning of Nell, his dead wife. So he decided that to get over her, he would have to have many, many women in the White House. Now, he had sometimes as many as 20 and 30 beautiful women in there. I mean, you could say he was auditioning a future first lady or something. In fact, his former president, Rutherford B. Hayes, came and was shocked. He said there were women running and boozing all over the White House. And so he became a great ladies' man and had more women in the White House at that time. The only person who even came anywhere close to inviting women to the White House was John F. Kennedy, but that was years later, and that was only when Jackie was away. So it was now, he also did a few things as president. He had to send the army out to the Southwest to kill some Native Americans, and they subdued Sitting Bull, and he also revised the U.S. Navy. And even though he was a product of the patronage system, he brought in the Civil Service Act. Up to that time, people were fired. You know, when a new president came in, you lost your job. And so he created the Civil Service Act, which is still in force today. So he did a few things, but he had a motto. He said, never do today what you can put off tomorrow. And he sort of didn't want to run for president again, and he was also ill. He had Bright's disease, which is a kidney ailment. And that was a sip of my morning coffee, as you heard. He had Bright's disease, and Florida killed him. At the end of the presidency, he went down to Florida and contracted malaria.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
And died shortly. In those days, if you went to Florida, you could have contracted malaria. Thank God we Floridians cleaned that up.
Although I have to wait. I have to tell you something that just recently in the Keys, they were having a problem with mosquitoes. And it was something else, not malaria, but something else that people were getting, really.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
Here I am.
That's right. Your favorite place. Yes, it was a little bit dangerous. People were being, I'm trying to remember what it was. I don't think it was malaria. No, it was something else, but you can look that up. I just did have a question. I'm really looking up on Google now all about Chester Arthur. It looked like he was a Republican, but he wasn't staunch. I mean, tell me about that.
Well, he was a Republican. The party had just really had been Whig party, and so it was going through a great transformation. But saying he's a Republican can be very confusing because the Republican Party today would probably not resemble his party at all.
I would think
I wanted to tell you, in the little time we have, the most controversial things he sold, because it's another interesting aspect of American history. James Buchanan had been the president before Abraham Lincoln, and Chester A. Arthur found, he went through all the White House while he was getting ready for his sale, but he found some things that were so personal that he decided to sell them to private collectors. So he found the papers and letters of James Buchanan, as I said, the president who preceded Abraham Lincoln. And these letters were very, very private. And James Buchanan, as is known by historians, was America's first gay president, which which is odd at the time because the conviction of homosexuality in Buchanan's day could lead to the death penalty. Mm. That's true. That's what it was back then. And he found the letters, the love letters of James Buchanan and William Rufus King. Now, William Rufus King had been vice president under Franklin Pierce. In fact, he and King lived together for 10 years in Washington, and the Andrew Jackson called them Miss Nancy and Aunt Fancy, and they went everywhere together. Oh. They were also called the Siamese twins, and sometimes they were introduced as Mr. Buchanan and his lady, or his wife even. And I mean, this is sort of an amazing part of American history. And their idea was to run for president and vice president. And at one time, Pierce wanted King to go and be the ambassador in Paris for 2 years. So after 10 years, they had a 2-year separation. And, of course, they wrote letters back and forth. And Buchanan wrote to his friend Cornelia Roosevelt, and that letter was found. He said that, I miss King so very, very much, but I have been unsuccessful in wooing another gentleman, and I am so much alone. And then King wrote, well, I will be back in 2 years, and I want you to wait for me. So he came back. Franklin Pierce was running for president, and he wanted Buchanan to be his vice president. And Buchanan said, no, I would rather you run King as the vice president, and I will be president, then I'll run later. And King and Pierce did win, but King became very ill, and he was in Cuba when he became vice president. He was the only person ever sworn into high office who was done so on a foreign shore, and but he lived for only 45 days as vice president. So Franklin Pierce, who was a total alcoholic and drunk all of his time in the White House, had to serve without a vice president. So I thought that was a sort of an interesting tour about a little known. In other words, they say what they don't teach you in American history classes.
Well, gee, I have to tell you that this was as though I was in a foreign country listening to someone speaking Japanese. I just could not believe all the things you're telling me. So while I've been listening to you, I got on Google, and it says this. And I don't know how you feel about this, but Huffington Post had an article that says, Abraham Lincoln, Richard Nixon, James Buchanan, and other famous figures rumored to be gay.
Yes. Well, that is true. And I know they said Abraham Lincoln and James Buchanan and who was the other one? Richard Nixon.
Yes.
Yes.
Is that true?
Well, yes, I have actually written a great deal about Richard Nixon. I think we once talked about his, I was very privy through a girlfriend of Bebe Rebozo,
yes,
Richard Nixon. And
right. Key Biscayne, that's where he was. Right.
Bebe Rebozo was a gay Miamian.
Yes.
And was Nixon's best friend, and they often, lived together on Key Biscayne. In fact, Bebe had his own room at the White House. I'm sure you remember. Yeah, I do remember that, but I don't remember that you insinuated that he was gay. Did you? And I missed it? I'm sorry. That may have been on another show. I'm so sorry. Because when a book came out about Richard Nixon and Bebe Rebozo, people knew that I knew Bebe Rebozo. The woman who worked for me, Margaret Forsman, had been for a time Bebe Rebozo's girlfriend. Bebe Rebozo was bisexual.
Okay, all right.
And her name was Margaret Forsman, and she told me a great deal about Nixon, and of course I took it all down for for a few. And of course, the Abraham Lincoln. In fact, I can, if I have a few minutes, I can tell you very briefly what that was, because Chester A. Arthur found many of the letters. Abraham Lincoln, when he first went to Springfield, Illinois, he didn't have any money really, and Springfield had just become the capital of Illinois, and he stopped off at this man at a general store, and he met Joshua Fry Speed, who was a very handsome, charming man, and Lincoln said he was looking for a room, and but he didn't have a lot of money, and apparently Joshua was very taken with him, and he said, "Well, you are welcome to use my bed," and Lincoln stayed in Joshua's bed for 4 years, and with the Civil War coming on, Joshua's father died in Kentucky, and he found that he owned 70 slaves. And so he decided to leave Illinois and go and take over his father was rather wealthy. And he told Lincoln that he was going to leave him. And Lincoln went into a morbid depression that lasted about 7 months, and he even couldn't perform his duties as a legislator in Springfield, and he went down to Kentucky and spent a month with Joshua Fry Speed, and he could not convince him to come to Washington. He offered him a role in his government, even the cabinet post, but they remained the greatest of friends, and Joshua got married, and Arthur found some letters that Lincoln had, copies that he had written, and apparently Lincoln was very concerned whether Joshua would be able to perform his duties as a husband on his wedding night, so he wanted to hear all about really very personal stuff. Many of those letters have been destroyed, but a few have been left. Actually, books have actually been written about Lincoln and Joshua Fry Speed. So what you read, or what you just discovered on Google, has a great deal of validity among historians. I've read now, I counted them. I was fascinated by Lincoln at one time. I think I've read about 35 books on Lincoln, although I think there are 300 written.
Well, I have to just tell you that every time, and the other thing is that I have a little bit more time to give you this morning. I can give you another 15 minutes because I'm going to be talking about our Cure Symposium, but I think people would much rather hear from you. So I guess my questions now, it's kind of interesting when you tell us about the presidents and now they're picking on the email from Hillary. I mean, every president or soon-to-be president or hopeful people who want to be president, they've got stuff. They're human beings, aren't they?
Yeah, that's true. But the you probably know that. I think I've told you before. Of course, my specialty is Hollywood celebrities. But I have this thing. I have always had ever since I wrote that book. By the way, my book I had 500 copies of my Chester A. Arthur book printed, and today they're collector's items at this big old printing house in Coral Gables. I think it's torn down now, and that's why that I met these, got involved with the Chester A. Arthur crowd. Now, I just want to say one more thing about our club. It is rapidly diminishing. I will not embarrass myself or the club to tell how few members we have today. We reached our peak in 1920, and my fear is that time is moving on, and some of us are not as young as we should be, and I think the Chester A. Arthur fan club will one day fade into history.
It's amazing.
By the way, the reason he recently is appearing a lot in the New York Times is there is a big debate going on in New York is to remove his home from the protected historical monuments preservation, and which means the building can be torn down.
But why would they do that? I thought every president has Why would they do that?
Well, for some reason there is a move afoot in New York to have 200 houses and buildings removed from the protected list, which means a skyscraper could go up.
Of course. Yeah, but he was a president. I mean, isn't that unusual?
Yes, and it was the house he was in when he was notified that President Garfield had been shot, and we may lose the battle because, sometimes moneyed interests take over here. Many historical homes have been, like, when, what was her name? Zadora, that actress. She bought Mary Pickford's house in California. Pickford, the most famous movie house in Hollywood, and he immediately tore it down and had another one rebuilt. And Engelbert Humperdinck, remember him?
Oh, I interviewed him on the radio show once,
Well, that devil bought Jane Mansfield's Pink Palace. And then developers had it torn down. I think Pickford and Jane Mansfield's Pink Palace would be great tourist attractions today.
Okay, but I want to ask you. You, of course, are in Staten Island, and you have this wonderful historic home, but it's been designated historic, and they're not going to be allowed to do anything with that. Well, why would they do that with something else?
I don't know, but I live on this block. There are 3 areas in New York, and where streets, and meaning everything on the street is protected. And one would be Greenwich Village, and one would be Brooklyn Heights, and the other is here on St. George, because some of these houses were really from early New York. Mine dated from 1827. And now all the houses along here, there was when I first bought it, there was an effort to tear all these homes down and build skyscrapers overlooking the skyline of Manhattan, which would have been very dramatic. But they decided to preserve them because this was also land owned by the Vanderbilts, and famous writers like Theodore Dreiser and Henry James and all sorts of people lived in these homes. And I told you, that my home was owned by William Fox, who his name is still around as 20th Century Fox. And so all this has been preserved now, and we can't do anything without getting permission. But for some mad reason, they're going to remove maybe 200 buildings from the protected list. Not here, but separate buildings throughout the city. And we're fighting to keep them. I think they all should be preserved myself.
Well, what other kind? Yes, well, of course I really believe that Chester A. Arthur should, but are they other famous people's homes? Is that the problem?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes, many of them. By the way, I know we're straying from the subject a bit, but
it's okay.
But I have this thing about, I have found so many unusual things about presidents, and not just presidents. I'm also fascinated by the first ladies. I mean, some of the first ladies have really amazing reputation. Did you know that Dolly Madison, shall we say, slept around?
Well, I thought I read that somewhere that you had written. I thought that when you wrote about Dolly Madison in one of the articles, I think that.
Yes, I have.
And I think you insinuated that.
Talked about the first, but what I find, they're so, we hear, one day we should do a show on George Washington, because every time I talk to him, people say, "Oh, he's the father of our country," and there was something about that cherry tree or something. And George Washington turned out to be quite a different man from what we've heard. And now all of this is available, but you really have to go into archives and read very esoteric books, because someone did write a book one time, what we are not taught about our presidents, and the same thing could be done about our first ladies. I just find, to me, I have this fascination with movie stars, but I just also have a fascination with presidents. And as you know, my latest book is about another president that we know about, Ronald Reagan in the 1980s, but much less about Ronald Reagan in the late 30s and 40s and the 50s, when he was a movie star, a Hollywood movie star. So, and I've done the Kennedys, so I'm a fair, equal opportunity expose writer, both Democrats and Republicans, and my upcoming book for the autumn will be devoted to Bill and Hillary. So.
Oh my! Well, you're gonna. Now, when you do that, would that be current, or is that before, or what?
Well, a great deal. You mean the Bill and Hillary?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, it will begin in 1970 when they came together. Although there will be journeys back into the past if it's relevant. But it's basically it's not a political book necessarily. I'm not particularly interested in the politics of Chester A. Arthur. I'm more interested in his 50 ladies at the White House and his persimmon underwear.
I understand.
Meaning,
I am also.
I go for the personal, as you well know. I go for the personal, and I found that so many stories in the background of Hillary and Bill. I've been collecting them now for years. I started hearing about him when he was governor of Arkansas. So I guess some people will say it's an anti-Clinton book, or I don't know. You know, I don't really concern myself. For example, many people tell me they think I make Reagan more interesting than they thought he ever was.
Yeah, I think that book. Yeah, I think what you've done is amazing. And is it getting a good run for its money?
Oh yes, I think it's just beginning. I've just got a big break that Barnes & Noble on all of its flagship stores is now agreed to feature it. Actually, beginning yesterday in the front window of all of its stores. So.
Congratulations. That's pretty exciting. And I think people have an interest in him since his name has been brought up so much during this the political world we live in. But what you're doing, of course, nobody knows about. I mean, you are the guy in the secrets. You're up in the attic and down in the basement.
Yeah, well, Reagan is a ladies' man. Now, depending on how you feel about men like that, I mean, some Republican men find that a feather in his cap, so to speak. I mean, they admire ladies' men, men who are successful with women. And Reagan loved women, and he didn't love just women. He loved beautiful women. And he got them, too. I mean, the list of his seductions is just fantastic. So, but he was a good-looking man and a good-looking movie star. And, of course, nearly all movie stars, whether you're good-looking or not, make it. Many people just are attracted to movie stars, period, And some women who I've followed many women who didn't do too well, say they were a movie star for about 5 or 6 years in the 50s. I found more and more of them can marry rich husbands because many men want to be married to a movie star, even though the star flickered very quickly. So,
I want to go back to something you said. Do you think that you would ever write a book on or is there a book written now on the First Ladies throughout history?
there are two or three of them. They're individual books, but they're like they're sort of like a little superficial paperback. I think it would be wonderful to almost write a book, if it, of voyeuristic interest, of the secrets of the first ladies who have occupied
right,
house. And,
exactly.
And I think the public would be really surprised at at some of the things going on. Of course, by the way, Dolly Madison is the latest survey. They put her as the I was amazed. They put her as the number one most admired first lady in America.
Is that right?
I would have voted for Eleanor.
Yes, I would have voted for Eleanor Roosevelt also. Oh yeah, well of course, she's a magnificent woman. I mean, she wasn't just some little lady in the White House. I mean, she was world famous in what she's done, so that's fine. But I think Jackie Kennedy also is that we've never had a Jackie Kennedy. I mean, Dolly Madison, in my opinion, even though I know I've read a lot of the things you've written, I think that for me, Jackie Kennedy was the most interesting woman.
I think in many ways, because Jackie, and that was one of my most successful books, Jackie brought style and grace to the White House.
Yes.
I adored Eleanor Roosevelt. You knew I got to know her in the last years of her life, actually meeting her in Miami at the Fontainebleau Hotel. And then I got to see her often in New York. But I'll tell you, she didn't care about, in fact, she told me one night with a lot of people around that she never really worried about what was going to be served at the White House. She spent no time at all. What was the chef serving for dinner? And she would often appear, particularly in the end of her life, she would just put on any dress that was readily available. Once or twice with a little soup stain or two on it as she got older. And whereas Jackie was the very opposite of that, and whereas Eleanor was interested in a political agenda, Jackie was the epitome, I think, of style and taste, and we've never seen the likes of her again. Remember, she followed women like Eleanor Roosevelt, Mrs. Truman, and Mamie Eisenhower, and neither of those women were particularly interested in decor or fashion. Mamie always kept her bangs and what they call Republican country club dresses. And poor Bess Truman, I don't think she ever worried about her wardrobe. And then along came this fabulous Jackie Kennedy, and just a glorious, glorious woman. And I also thought that Jackie was extremely beautiful, except people criticized that her eyes were so far apart that they had to be linked by glasses that equaled the Golden Gate Bridge. I never thought her eyes.
I didn't either, but it's true. But the one thing that around that whole Camelot is the fact that her husband was assassinated, and of course her son dies. I mean, amazing. And then, she was quite a woman, and even to the end. I mean, she worked on books, and so no, I think that she's an interesting woman.
The only thing I disapproved of her greatly was because I do not believe in censorship, as you know.
Oh, and she did that?
Everything I write. She tried to censor books, and I think, everybody has sort of a dark side, and I think she brought out many wonderful books. I have most of them. I have so many books, I have to store them next door in an old convent. I have most of the books that and they're usually art books or have a reason for being, but she was very, very, she was really a Putin-like censor trying to prevent books being written about her husband, or books that invaded her privacy. My God, what would she have said about my book?
Oh, right. But when you think of it, and of course, how is her daughter doing?
Well, her daughter is being a very respectable woman as the ambassador to Japan. She's been involved in no scandal. She has performed her duties well and is extremely liked by the Japanese people. I hear that her marriage may be in trouble, but she has a wonderful son. They think maybe he might one day enter into politics. And she is also a very, very wealthy woman because she was the survivor of that family. And so all of the money that her brother had passed to her, and her father took care of her, but she also now inherited John's legacy from his father, and her grandfather also left huge bequests for Carolyn and John, and she also now takes over John's bequests from the grandfather, and then she inherited all of Jackie's vast estate, which is now worth far more money than it was when Jackie died. So she is now a very, very wealthy woman, and is interested in public service. I mean, she could just lead a life of luxury, going from yacht to yacht, and she is performing a public service. And from all reports, I think she's doing very, very well.
Well, I tell you what, this has been wonderful, and I have just loved having you on longer. We have done 3 cutting-edge symposiums, and it's called Cure, and we're going to be putting on our 4th one. We've just gotten actually associated with the Palm Beach State College, which is on the FAU campus, and I know these words aren't strange to you because you keep up what's going on here in South Florida. And so they're going to host this for us, and it's very exciting. We're going to have, I wish you were here because you would love it. We have about 14 of the most distinguished physicians and scientists from down in South Florida. And it's going to be in April, and if I could, I would do anything to get you down here. But, you just hole up in your beautiful home up in Staten Island, and you just keep turning out these books. I don't know how you do that.
By the way, I'm very interested. I wasn't planning to talk about Abraham Lincoln, or I was going to mention, and Richard Nixon. But while we were talking, you plugged into your internet and found that
yes
out about them.
Yep, I did it. I just put in. I was with Buchanan, and then it came up. It actually even said something about Barack Obama, but I think that was just stuff that they pick on him for everything. But yeah, no, it said all that. So just go into Huffington Post actually, and you'll see it.
You may have forgotten, but you and I one time did a show about Barack Obama and those rumors, including 2 or 3 books out.
Right.
Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
I mean,
I ignore those things. I ignore them. It's just insane. It's
many I found that in almost everybody's life, not everybody's, but in so many lives, particularly of people who have had a very, very widely exposed life, there is just so much that dark corners in people's lives, and that's why, frankly, I wouldn't write a biography of somebody that I thought would put me to sleep. I really wouldn't.
Of course not.
Right now I'm doing Peter O'Toole. Well, Peter O'Toole, whether you're interested in him or not, my God, he had the most fascinating life. He got involved with people that you just couldn't imagine, the people he got involved with. So to me, it makes a good read only because of the life he led, whether you liked his movies or not. Just to touch that many lives of that many famous people, it makes a great story. And that's why I like Chester A. Arthur, not just for the persimmon underwear, or not for the fact that he always wanted 2 women in the bed with him, because he just sort of liked to be in the middle and one on each side. I thought that was
it is.
That was charming.
I have to go find.
I mean, how So you know that I like the human interest part more than I like what Senator and then Secretary of State Clinton did or said to the Egyptian president. I mean, I like the personal Bill Clinton or the personal
of course.
Hillary. Like, what was she really like as a woman is what I'm interested in.
Right. Well, I was thinking, where am I going to buy persimmon underwear for Bill for Father's Day? I'd love to figure out, but I can't have them made. I have to go find them. Maybe Victoria's Secret doesn't have men's pants, I think, only women.
I don't know. Well, of course, today underwear is in every known color. But the fact that why would orange be Frank Sinatra's favorite color?
Yeah,
why would he want all of his underwear orange? I mean,
why? Why? Do you know?
It's just like, what? and in other words, if you understand that about me, you know what I go for. I mean, I like personal things like that. I mean,
of course,
because I just find so many, even biographies, they're sort of boring because they recite, like a lot of movie star biographies. Oh, she made this movie, and then this director put her in this movie, and then she made this movie, and then she got married and had 3 children.
Yeah, that's right. Well, there's so many people that you have told us about that I feel so privileged to know you, to have you write a column every month for us, and to all the books that you've written, and to be on the radio show once a month. So I'm glad we had extra time. I'm going to end my show a little bit in just a short while after you go back and have coffee or what do you do? Do you go back and write after you get off the show, or do you go to sleep?
Yes, I have to write right now.
Okay.
About the affair that Peter O'Toole had with Jodie Foster.
Okay. We'll look forward to that because I know you're working on it. Well, by
the way, did you know that Jodie Foster has gotten married?
No, I don't keep up with that, but only through you. You'll tell me what happened. So your book your book is now, when is it coming out? On Peter O'Toole?
In June.
Okay.
Well,
June.
Foster now has taken a wife.
Oh,
she now has a wife,
okay. I don't know. All right.
She married in 2014, but before she took a wife, she had a brief fling with Peter.
Well, let me tell you, I know you do. And thank you, Darwin, so much. And I really appreciate it. And I love the article. It's going to come out now in our next issue. That's at the printer right now. That you wrote, I won't tell anybody. That was quite an interesting one.
I've had some fun this morning.
I've had fun too. I've learned so much. My head's swimming. So thank you. You are such a dear, sweet friend of mine.
You take care, my dear.
All right. Bye, Darwin.